record at this point. Great. Welcome, everyone. I'm Ann Wallace. I'm the host of Saturday Morning Poetry from the Native Plant Society of New Jersey, Hudson County Chapter. And every week we feature a poem on Saturday morning on the Instagram page of the Native Plant Society. And then midweek, we bring that poet on to speak with us and to read their poem. And today, this is so very exciting. We have Barbara Kingsolver with us. Welcome, Barbara. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
We were just thrilled to have, that you gave us permission to share your poem, The Hands of Trees, this past Saturday, and that you're here with us today. It's a real honor, I have to say.
Well, thank you. And thanks for what you do for poetry and nature and native plants and, sort of helping people see the connections.
That is what we're all about, trying to see the connections between nature and poetry and the kind of keen observation that we bring to the world when we're reading and writing poetry. I mean, it's also true of any of the arts. If you're photographers, and a lot of us are doing that with our cameras now, out there taking pictures, we're learning to look differently, more closely, and that's maybe we're not learning, we've been doing that forever, but
no matter how much you already know, slowing down and observing will always give you more. I have a friend who's a botanical illustrator, and he says he doesn't think botanists really know a plant until they've drawn it, which is another level of taking time. But poetry does that too. Poetry draws pictures in your brain.
It does. That's a really nice way of thinking about it. Yeah, and I like that you have to. It involves a level of looking and interaction when you're drawing, whether with words or with your pencil. There's a connection you're actively engaged in. Yeah. I'm going to pause us for a second and back up because we jumped right in before I even properly introduced you. So let me back up here. And again, welcome everyone who's joining us. And our guest today is Barbara Kingsolver. And I think that pretty much anyone who is here probably knows a lot about you already, Barbara. That Barbara is the author of many best-selling works of fiction, including Demon Copperhead, which is coming out on the 18th of October. So yes, oh, beautiful, beautiful. Available for pre-order right now, but will be in bookstores in just a week and a half or 2 weeks. So that's super exciting. Also, some other books of yours are Unsheltered, Flight Behavior, which I just finished reading. I don't know how I missed it when it came out, but I just finished reading it. And I have to say it was the perfect book to read in September when the monarchs were swirling around in New Jersey. This is where they were as I was reading. So I'd read, I'd go for a walk, I'd see monarchs. It was lovely. And they were where they were supposed to be versus
fortunately. Also a novel to read in September when the new hurricane season is reminding us that climate change.
Yes, that was the other
thing for us to talk about, which is what that novel. Yeah. The novel is not really about butterflies as much as we all love them, but about climate change and why it's so hard for us to talk about it.
Yeah. And butterflies become the harbinger of that. Yeah, of course. They're exactly. Yes, so I was very thinking about that as well with the hurricanes that Puerto Rico and Florida were hit with as I was finishing that book. I should finish my introduction. This is my longest introduction ever because I just keep stopping because there's so much to say as asides. Well, I'm interrupting myself. But then also, other books, the Poisonwood Bible, Animal Dreams, we could go on. But then also what I think a lot of your novel reading fans maybe don't know so much about your poetry. And this book came out in 2020, I think it was, How to Fly. But you also had another collection earlier in your career, Another America, So 2 poetry collections plus other books. You've been awarded with the National Humanities Medal, which is our country's highest honor for service through the arts. I think that's the perfect award for you, because I do think of your work as service, and it's creativity, it's everything plus service. It's work that makes us really think and hopefully take action with in our own lives, as well as the Dayton Literary Peace Prize for the body of your work. And for those of you, in terms of Demon Copperhead, if you want to find book events in your area, go to barbarakingsolver.net. They're all posted there. And I want to tell our local audience members that there is a reading. Barbara will be in Brooklyn at the Center for Fiction on Tuesday, October 18th at 7 p.m., which is the release day, the launch day of the book. So that's pretty exciting that those things overlap for us locally in this area, Northern New Jersey, New York City, for that Brooklyn event. So I'm hoping to be there. So thank you again for joining us. And I think it would be nice to start with, Kim just put in the chat, if you have, for our audience, if you have any questions for Barbara, please put them in the Q&A. We have that Q&A section. There's also the chat, but questions could go in the Q&A, and I'll try to stay on top of that. I'm very bad at following that, but hopefully Kim will point my attention to it if I miss any questions. So please do chime in with your questions if you have any as we go. So would you mind, Barbara, reading The Hands of Trees, which is the poem that we featured on Saturday?
I would be delighted.
Wonderful. And that is from How to Fly, for those of you.
Right, from How to Fly in 10,000 Easy Lessons.
Yeah.
The Hands of Trees. Maple is wide open, splay-fingered in joy, jazz hands. Or the friendly gesture, making a point politely, as if Canadian. Catalpa, a church full of Southern Baptist ladies in summer dresses, devoutly moist, mid-sermon, held in suspense as Jesus rounds up his rascal lambs, the steady motion of all those fans. Aspen, notorious for the palsy. To be fair, the air is thin up there in the Rockies, and sometimes wolves. Sassafras wears mittens knitted by a harebrained ant, sometimes with an extra thumb, sometimes none whatsoever. Fig leaves, cupped as if to conceal, as everyone and his brother knows by now, the shy parts of Eve. Less delicate than you might think, sturdily veined, made for the job. Redbud, Southern belle, all heart, no backbone, thrusts hers forward, dangling limp from the wrist, waiting to be kissed. Mimosa, anyone can see how they tremble with thanks for a star that concedes to work the day shift, how they reach for light's full octave, recoil from the firm handshake, long to stroke the velvet nap of night, but with dusk's owl eyes blinking open, press closed in prayer.
That's such a delightful poem.
Thank you. I was so surprised you chose it. This is a really sort of whimsical, almost childlike poem. I mean, and I was also really aware when I wrote it that you really have to know these trees. You know, you have to be able to picture the heart-shaped sort of dangling wrist of the red bud, the Southern belle, and those waving catalpa leaves. And if you're, a city dweller who has no familiarity with these trees, you're just going to pass that one right up. You won't get it. But you got it, so great.
Well, it reminded me, as you were reading it, I was thinking of what you said about your friend who said that to really know a plant or probably anything, you have to draw it, right? And what I feel like you've done here is you've drawn it, but not only that, you've given us a character sketch for each one of these trees. You've turned them into characters that we can see. And so a catalpa tree is not one I'm familiar with, but I know maples, I know aspens, I know sassafras, fig trees. So those things, those trees, they come alive, and even a fig leaf. I mean, we've all seen it in art, right? You make the reference to the Eve, covering Eve and the shy parts of Eve. That's a wonderful way of saying it. So we picture it, and then so there are ways in, even if you don't know these trees personally. Everyone knows what a maple leaf is. It's on the Canadian flag, right?
Right. Yeah, I started with the most accessible and
exactly
down from there.
Yeah. And then mimosa. I mean, I know. I'm gonna go here. Somebody put it in the chat on Instagram about how invasive they are, and I loved your responses. I think something like, one person's trash tree is another one's treasure, but.
Yeah, I had no idea that it was invasive, because we here where I live in southern Appalachia, we must be at the very northern edge of their range, because they're so delicate here. I love them, and I've had about three or four pop up somewhere near my house, and I've taken good care of them and sort of tendered them along, and then they die. They just don't make it here. So I'm really sorry. Maybe as the climate warms up, they will become an invader here. But I have a relationship with mimosas. I have a relationship with sassafras. And I think that's what, even though it is very childlike, this poem is about the relationships that that we can have with trees. And I know that for me, and maybe that's why I think of it as childlike, for me, even though I'm a biologist, I studied biology in college and in graduate school. And so I have a biological relationship with trees and a biological understanding of them, taxonomical understanding of them. But before I had any of that, I had a spiritual relationship with trees. When I was a little kid, I went to the forest, and the trees were my people. So I felt like the sassafras, this crazy thing where it has mittens and it doesn't have mittens, and it's.
And we use the language that children will appreciate in talking about sassafras. Is that a glove, a mitten, to describe the different.
Exactly. Right? It's a way in. It's a way. It's like the original taxonomy, right?
Right. And that's what probably what pulls you into then want to study biology, right? That the trees were your people, so of course you want to study them. You want to know more as you grew older and had the capacity to understand it in a different way.
Yeah, the opportunity.
Yeah. But I like that. Trees were my people, because that's exactly what they are here. They are people.
They are. Yeah. And for a long while, I lived in Tucson, where there aren't a lot of trees, Tucson, Arizona, but saguaros were my people.
Yeah.
They really do feel like.
And they're very people-like.
They feel like they're looking down on you.
Well, we chose it in because it does invite people to look differently. This poem, we chose this poem because there is the whimsy, and we've had some very serious poems in this series, but we've also been trying to highlight delight. We had Ross Gay on, and he, wrote a book of delights. And I think there's something there's something so valuable in highlighting what is delightful, what is whimsical, because I think we often don't think of poetry as having that capacity, right? Or doing that job, but that job is also important. And also there are many other important jobs of poetry too, I would say.
Well, but just attachment, just cultivating an attachment between people and other species, because we walk around, 99% of our time thinking about one species and ignoring all the rest. So if it's, it's sort of a taboo in both I don't know, natural history, nature writing, and in science to personify, to anthropomorphize animals or plants. But people need it. I mean, if that's the way in for a lot of people to sort of to help cultivate an empathy for all the other species in the world, which we desperately need to do because we need them. Then I'm not. I mean, I've never been afraid to break the rules of sort of the culture of science. I think it's kind of my stock in trade to bridge these gaps, and I feel like personification and anthropomorphizing is a starting point. I mean, you can't. You have to move pretty quickly from there into. No, but they are trees and they really don't care about you, and they don't know there's a pandemic going on, and they have their own lives, and they deserve to have their own lives, and those lives are noble and important.
Right.
But to begin with, you just got to get that spark of empathy, and I think that's what I try to do in pretty much all my writing.
Yes, I can absolutely see that. And it's that identification and empathy, but then it also, as you said, quickly turns into, it's not that they are like us, but that we can kind of have to flip it over then as well, because sometimes when we identify, we're putting attention on ourselves of, oh, I can understand that because I think it's like me and I matter, or my people matter. But then sometimes we start to see a larger connection of that. It's not, we start to take a back seat.
Well, the point is just to understand that they have lives that are as important to them as ours are to us. Exactly. And I mean, every morning when I hear the Carolina wren, starting up in the morning, I know he's saying, this is my house, this is my place. I own this joint. Right. And he does in his mind, and for his lady and his family, he does. And so that's the crucial point, to understand that their lives are as valid as ours, even though, these trees, we turn them into furniture and then we sit on them. But that was a glorious life. Not to forget it. This desk was once alive.
Yeah. Somebody put in the chat, Wendy wrote, this is a real flip, going to grief and climate change. And maybe this is too big a transition to make at this moment, but I do think there's a real connection. And I think it's very intentional in your work to go from this celebration of life to then drawing our attention to things like climate change. As you said, flight behavior is about climate change, but you bring us into it in that book through butterflies, right? We see monarchs and they look, they're glorious, but the visually glorious, but not glorious in the reality.
Right, but they need to be in the right place. They need to be on their own. Their flight behavior needs to be their own.
What they're supposed to be.
Well, on the subject of climate change and sort of grasping it, comprehending it, I have a poem about that too. Would that be a good idea for me?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. It's called Great Barrier. And I guess I'll introduce it by saying that I was lucky enough to go to Australia a few years ago and to see the Great Barrier Reef. I actually got to stay on an island out on the reef for 4 days, and so that I could just snorkel right off the shore into these gardens of giant clams, and it's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And it's this immense living body, in the ocean, and it's dying, as we all know. It isn't dead, and it's so important for people to realize it is still there. It is mostly alive, and parts of it are seem to be surviving better than other parts, and it probably will adapt. But it moved me so much, this great barrier, that it made me think about the barriers that we all encounter in trying to think about and talk about climate change, and why is it so hard for us to care beyond ourselves. And I was trying to find a way into this poem, and as it happened, Notre Dame Cathedral burned, and And I noticed how people were so moved by that. That human creation, burning. People just said, this is the end of the world. This is unendurable, we should lose this cathedral. And I thought, well, now there's a poem. So
Yeah.
this is Great Barrier. The cathedral is burning. Absent flame or smoke, stained glass explodes in silence. Fractal scales of angel, damsel, rainbow, parrot. Charred beams of blackened coral lie in heaps on the sacred floor. White stones fallen from high places, spires collapsed, crushing the sainted turtle and gargoyle octopus. Something there is in my kind that cannot love a reef, a tundra, a plain stone breast of desert ever quite enough. A tree, perhaps, once recomposed as splendid furniture. A forest after the whole of it is planed to posts and beams and raised to a heaven of earnest construction in the name of Our Lady. All Paris stood on the bridges to watch her burning, believing a thing this old, this large and beautiful must be holy and cannot be lost. And coral temples older than Charlemagne suffocate unattended, bleach and bleed from the eye, the centered heart. Lord of leaves and fishes, lead me across this great divide. Teach me how to love the sacred places, not as one devotes to one who made me in his image and is bound to love me back. I mean, as a body loves its microbial skin, the worm its nape of loam, all secret otherness forgiven. Love beyond anything I will ever make of it.
Thank you. It is an appropriate poem for today, Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement. It ends like a prayer.
It is a prayer.
Yeah.
It's a prayer of atonement. It's a huge I'm sorry. It's a huge we are sorry. As humans, we are. I mean, not just a few, most of us at some level are sorry for what we have done without full consciousness of the other lives that we've taken. And I see progress, I see hope, I see change. I feel like, the difference between the way, my grandparents had respect for nature, but they also saw it as something fully to be used by people. Yes. When the chestnuts started dying in these forests, they said, well, just cut all the rest of them down so we can use the lumber. That was not just my grandparents, all of our grandparents, our ancestors, came into nature as something to be gleaned, to be used for our purpose. I think that, and of course, as a species, we're still, and as governments, as sort of population units, we're still doing that, absolutely. But more and more of us are starting to understand in sort of both scientific and spiritual ways, the way that nature doesn't belong to us. Yeah. We belong to it. We owe it our lives. Literally, we owe it our lives. Every intake of breath was recently inside a leaf that made oxygen for us to breathe. Just to thank the chairs and the desks for their lives. It's a daily practice. It's a prayer.
Yeah. And when you bring us into these very close moments of reflection and observation, here, just making us stop and think about, why are we mourning a cathedral? And not the other things. And you ask us to you're asking us to engage in this kind of critical thinking that's so important of, why that cathedral and not the Great Barrier Reef?
Yeah. And I mean, I was sad too. Of course, we mourn something beautiful made by people, but it's just, the contrast struck me how it's losing something we made ourselves is so salient. Losing something that was made by much larger hands, by the hands, of time and evolution, it's harder for us to appreciate.
Yeah. I'm just seeing we have a little time warning that we're running low on time here. I wondered if, there's so much we could talk about forest fires. The parallels of fires, right? But I wondered if we might end on a love poem. Would you mind reading love poem?
Yes, that would be happier. And this is,
we need to go to the,
we need to go to hope. We always have to end on hope, and I do, and this is a love poem that I wrote for my husband, who is an ornithologist and a bird watcher. Those are two different things, but he loves both. He loves birds very much, and learning about them and watching them. And this is sort of it's a love poem for how we can appreciate the world around us. Love poem with birds. And this is for Stephen. They are your other flame. Your world begins and ends with the dawn chorus, a plaint of a saw-whet owl, and in between, the 7 different neotropical warblers you will see on your walk to the mailbox. It takes a while. I know now not to worry. Once I resented your wandering eye that flew away mid-sentence, chasing any raft of swallows. I knew as we sat on the porch, unwinding the cares of our days, you were listening to me through a fine mesh of oriole, towhee, flycatcher. I said it was like kissing through a screen door. You're not all here. But who could be more present than a man with the patience of sycamores, showing me the hummingbird's nest you've spied so high in a tree, my mortal eye can barely make out the lichen-dabbed knot on an elbow of branch. You will know the day her nestlings leave it. The wonder is that such an eye that lets not even the smallest sparrow fall from notice beholds me also, that I might walk the currents of our days with red and golden feathers in my hair, my plain tongue laced with music, that we, the birds and I, may be text and illumination in your book of common prayer.
And once again, we end with a prayer.
We do. It's kind of a
different kind
in this book. 10,000 easy lessons on how to fly from your own life into the world.
Yeah. It's a lovely poem. Who could be more present than a man with the patience of sycamores? And back to trees, right?
Exactly. It's they're my people. It always comes back to trees.
I do want to tell our audience here today, this book is delightful, How to Fly in 10,000 Easy Lessons. And the how-to poems in the beginning, some of them made me laugh out loud. There's a lot of serious content in here. There's a lot of hope. Some cautionary tales, but also a lot of humor, which is, also a hallmark of your fiction as well. So that's I remember when I was reading this the first time, and I was surprised to be literally laughing out loud, and it was wonderful. You take us through a range of emotions in this book. So thank you. And thank you so much for being with us today, Barbara. This, again, such a treat. I want to put in one more plug for Demon Copperhead that comes out on October 18th. And for the local people from the New York City metropolitan area, there is a book. Barbara will be at a book event on the 18th in Brooklyn. So at 7 p.m. Find that information on her website, barbarakingsolver.net. Hope people can make it. I have a couple of other quick announcements. On the 23rd, the Native Plant Society is having a plant sale at James Braddock Park in North Bergen. That was supposed to happen this weekend, but we had the remnants of Hurricane Ian made that be postponed to the 23rd. And there will also be a live podcast recording of the podcast Native Plants, Healthy Planet at 2:00 on the 23rd. Please come out for that. And then also next week, we are wrapping up our Saturday morning poetry series for this summer and fall with special guest Lily Taylor. She's an award-winning actress and also bird ambassador. So it's also nice we ended with a poem on birds because that is Lily Taylor's passion. And she is not a poet herself, but she selected one of her favorite poems called In Flight by Jennifer K. Sweeney. So we will feature that on Saturday, and Lily next Thursday on Zoom at 7:00 Eastern time will read that poem by Jennifer Sweeney and talk about it. And I think she's also going to share a poem by Emily Dickinson. How could we not? If you want to think about hope and birds, there's Dickinson is there for us. So those are my announcements. But again, Barbara, thank you so much for this. It was just a pleasure speaking with you today.
You're welcome.
Thanks. And thank you for the work that you do and bringing art, creativity, that close eye of the artist, the poet, the fiction writer to nature so that we can, do a better job preserving and caring for our world.
We will. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for what you do.
So much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who joined us here today.
Bye.
Bye.